The word sandwich came from a person, a British earl in 1762, whose aristocratic title you have been casually eating for centuries. But the famous story of how he invented it? Historians say most of it never happened. In 1762, the word sandwich made its printed debut in London's bustling pamphlet scene. The Oxford English Dictionary points to that year as the moment a simple meal, meat tucked between slices of bread, got its famous name. The reason? John Montagu, the 4th Earl of Sandwich, a man whose title came from the coastal town of Sandwich in Kent. That town's name goes all the way back to Old English, and it means sandy harbor. But it wasn't the town's fishermen or bakers who gave us the sandwich. It was the Earl's habit that caught the public's attention. Pamphlets and newspapers from the 1760s mention the Earl by name, describing his preference for thin slices of cold meat between bread as he played cards late into the night. The dish was new enough to be called a novelty, but already popular enough to be called a sandwich after him. The earliest citation in the Oxford English Dictionary ties the word directly to the Earl, and by 1765, reviews and club menus in London were calling it the fashionable sandwich. The title itself, Earl of Sandwich, had been around since the 17th century, but it was Montagu's practical approach to eating that turned it into a household word. No other food owes its name so directly to a single person, documented in real time by the press and pamphlet writers of Georgian England. This is the moment when a nobleman's title jumped from the peerage rolls to the lunch table, giving us a word that is now as ordinary as bread itself. The gambling table story has a way of sticking to the sandwich like mustard to ham, but when historians go looking for proof, things get slippery. The first time the full anecdote about the Earl of Sandwich with cards in hand and too busy to eat properly actually appears in print. It isn't during his own lifetime. It pops up in 1770, years after the word itself was already in use. And even then, it reads more like a juicy bit of gossip than a first-hand account. Victorian writers, obsessed with tracing the roots of everyday words, loved this tale. They copied it into etymology columns, school books, and even restaurant menus, repeating the same story until it felt like fact. But modern food historians are quick to point out what's missing. Not a single diary, letter, or club record from Montagu or his friends mentions this legendary night at the gaming table. No household account spells out a recipe. Instead, what survives are second-hand stories, sticky legends that clung to the sandwich as it became a household name. The gambling tale is catchy, but it's built on echoes and repetition, not hard evidence. Even so, the myth grew legs thanks to Victorian word hunters and today's social media, turning a practical snack into a story that's almost too good to check. That's what makes the sandwich's origin such a classic case of folklore outpacing fact. London's coffee houses and gentlemen's clubs were only the starting point for the sandwich's rise. The real engine behind its spread was the city's booming print culture. Caricaturists like James Gilray poked fun at high society by sketching the Earl of Sandwich with his bread and meat creation, turning a private habit into a public joke. These satirical prints circulated far beyond the elite, landing in shop windows and on street corners where anyone could see them. At the same time, the city's growing appetite for quick, portable meals was changing how ordinary people ate. As factories multiplied and the workday grew longer, laborers needed food that could be eaten on the go, no forks, no fuss. The sandwich fit perfectly into this new rhythm of urban life. By the early 1800s, it wasn't just a fashionable dish for club members, but a practical lunch for clerks, printers, and factory hands. The word itself traveled through newspapers, cartoons, and the daily routines of a city always in motion, setting the stage for the sandwich to slip quietly into the vocabulary and lunchboxes of the wider world. In 1951, Saigon vendors filled baguettes with pate, pickled carrots, cilantro, and chili, calling it banh mi, a new word that year, born from French bread and Vietnamese ingenuity. The city's mornings pulse with these sandwiches, each one a collision of colonial history and local taste. Milan, in the 1960s, hummed with cafe crowds ordering panini, ciabatta, or focaccia pressed with prosciutto or mozzarella, hot and ready for students and young workers. By the end of the decade, panini stood as a symbol of Italian youth, toasted and eaten on the move. Copenhagen's 1912 bakery ledgers show rugbrød, dense rye, dominating sales, the foundation for smørrebrød, open-faced and topped with herring or roast beef, a midday ritual across the city. In Tampa's Ybor City, a 1903 ad offered the Cuban sandwich: Cuban bread, roast pork, ham, Swiss, pickles, and mustard, pressed for factory workers. Each sandwich captures a city's spirit and a baker's hand. Every time you grab a sandwich, you are repeating a quirky bit of history. Language and lunch never stop evolving. Who knows what today's bite will be called tomorrow? Let me know your favorite twist below.